The fluorescent lights of Meridian Capital hummed their monotonous tune across the 42nd floor of the glass tower in downtown Manhattan. It was a Wednesday morning, the kind where the November wind whipped through the urban canyons below, rattling windows and sending steam rising from subway grates like ghosts of the city's underground soul. Inside the gleaming offices where ambition wore designer suits and coffee cost more than most people's lunch, Sarah Mitchell sat at her desk outside the executive conference room, her fingers dancing across the keyboard with the practiced efficiency of someone who had been doing this job for 7 years. Sarah was 34, with warm brown eyes that still held kindness, despite working in an environment that often rewarded its absence. Her dark hair was pulled back in a professional bun, and she wore a navy blazer that she'd bought on sale 3 months ago, carefully steaming it each Sunday night to maintain the illusion of effortless corporate polish. She'd been the executive secretary to the vice president of operations since she was 27, working her way up from the reception desk, taking night classes in business administration, dreaming of the day when she might sit in one of those leather chairs in the boardroom instead of outside it. The morning had started like any other. She'd arrived at 7:30, prepared the conference room for the 8 o'clock executive meeting, arranged the catering, printed the agenda packets, and ensured every detail was perfect. Sarah took pride in being invisible in the best way, the person who made everything run smoothly so that others could take credit for success. But today was different. Today, there was an electricity in the air, whispers traveling through cubicles like wildfire. The company's largest investor was visiting, a man whose name carried weight across 3 continents, Karim Al-Rashid, a 46-year-old business magnate from Dubai, whose venture capital firm had pumped $30 million into Meridian Capital 2 years ago. His arrival had been unexpected, announced only yesterday, and the executive team was scrambling. Sarah had never met Mr. Al-Rashid, though she'd heard the stories. Self-made billionaire, sharp as a Damascus blade, fair but unforgiving. The kind of man who could see through corporate smoke and mirrors with a single glance. Before we continue with Sarah's story, I'd like to ask you, where are you watching this from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. I love connecting with viewers from all around the world. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We share incredible stories like this every week, and you definitely don't want to miss what happens next. Trust me, this one has a twist you won't see coming. Now let's get back to Sarah's day, which is about to take a turn she never expected. At 7:55, the elevators chimed, and the executive team began filing into the conference room. Mark Harrison, the CEO, a silver-haired man in his 50s with a smile that never quite reached his eyes. Jennifer Torres, the CFO, sharp and calculating, who wore her ambition like perfume. David Chen, VP of Marketing, always checking his phone. And Richard Thornton, Sarah's direct boss, the VP of Operations, a man whose expensive cologne couldn't mask the scent of insecurity that followed him everywhere. Richard was 42, divorced twice, with a corner office and a habit of taking credit for his team's work. He'd never been particularly kind to Sarah, but she'd learned to navigate his moods, anticipating his needs before he voiced them, covering for his mistakes, making him look competent to those who mattered. "Sarah," Richard snapped as he passed her desk, not looking at her. "Coffee, now. The good stuff, not that swill from the break room. And make sure those financial reports are in the right order this time." Sarah's jaw tightened, but she nodded. The reports were already perfect. They always were. She'd stayed late last night, ensuring every number was accurate, every chart properly labeled. But Richard had a habit of blaming her when things went wrong, even when the fault was his own. She was returning with Richard's coffee, a pour-over from the private executive blend that cost $40 a pound, when the elevator doors opened again. The air seemed to change. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Heads turned. Karim Al-Rashid stepped into the reception area. He was not what Sarah had expected. Yes, he wore an impeccably tailored charcoal suit, probably Brioni or Tom Ford, with a crisp white shirt and no tie, the top button undone in a way that suggested confidence rather than casualness. But it was his presence that struck her. He was tall, perhaps 6'2", with dark hair graying at the temples, olive skin, and eyes that seemed to absorb everything. There was a stillness about him, the kind of calm that comes from genuine power, rather than the performance of it. 2 assistants flanked him, a young woman with a tablet and a serious-looking man who was clearly security. But Karim's attention swept the floor with methodical precision, taking in every detail, every face, every reaction. Mark Harrison emerged from his office, hand extended, smile plastered on. Mr. Al-Rashid, welcome, welcome. We're honored to have you here. Karim shook his hand with a firm grip, his expression neutral. Mr. Harrison, thank you for accommodating this visit on short notice. His voice was deep, accented with the precise English of someone educated at Oxford or Cambridge, each word chosen carefully. There was no warmth in his tone, but no coldness either, just assessment. Of course, of course. Anything for our most valued investor. Please, the team is waiting in the conference room. We have a full presentation prepared. Sarah stood by her desk, trying to be invisible as the group moved past her. But as Karim walked by, he paused. His eyes met hers for just a fraction of a second. She saw something there. Recognition, perhaps, or curiosity. Then he was gone, disappearing into the conference room with Mark and the others. She exhaled, not realizing she'd been holding her breath. The meeting lasted 2 hours. Sarah could hear the muffled voices through the thick glass walls, see the PowerPoint presentations cycling on the large screen, watch the body language of executives trying too hard to impress. She worked at her desk, answering emails, coordinating schedules, being efficient and invisible. At 10:15, Richard emerged, his face flushed. "Sarah, get in here. Bring the Q3 operational files." Something in his tone made her stomach drop. She grabbed the files and entered the conference room. All eyes turned to her. The executives sat around the massive table, papers scattered, laptops open. Karim sat at the far end, his assistant beside him, his expression unreadable. "Sarah," Richard said, his voice tight, "can you explain why the operational efficiency reports for Q3 show a 15% discrepancy?" She blinked. "I'm sorry, sir. The numbers. They don't match what we provided to Mr. Al-Rashid's team last month. This is a serious problem." Sarah's mind raced. She'd prepared those reports herself, cross-checked every figure with the data from finance and operations. There was no discrepancy. She knew there wasn't. "Mr. Thornton, I reviewed those reports multiple times. The numbers are accurate according to the source data provided by your department and verified with—" "Are you contradicting me?" Richard's voice rose, his face reddening. "Are you seriously standing here in front of our most important investor, claiming that I'm wrong?" "I'm not saying that, sir. I'm just explaining that the reports reflect the data I was given. The data you compiled. Your responsibility." He stood, jabbing a finger toward her. "This is exactly the kind of incompetence I've been dealing with. Do you have any idea what this makes us look like?" Sarah felt the heat rising in her cheeks. Around the table, the other executives looked uncomfortable, but no one spoke up. Jennifer Torres examined her manicured nails. David Chen suddenly became fascinated with his phone. Mark Harrison cleared his throat but said nothing. Only Karim Al-Rashid watched intently, his dark eyes moving between Richard and Sarah with laser focus. "Mr. Thornton," Sarah tried to keep her voice steady, "if there's an error, I'd like the opportunity to review it and understand where." "There's nothing to review. Your services are no longer needed at Meridian Capital. You're fired. Effective immediately." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Sarah felt the floor tilt beneath her. 7 years. 7 years of arriving early, staying late, covering mistakes, sacrificing her personal life, believing that hard work and loyalty mattered. "You can't be serious," she whispered. "Dead serious. Security will escort you out. You have 15 minutes to clear your desk. And frankly, Sarah, you should be grateful we're not pursuing legal action for the damage your incompetence may have caused this company." Tears burned behind Sarah's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not here, not in front of these people. She straightened her spine, clutched the files to her chest like armor, and turned toward the door. "Ms. Mitchell," the voice was calm, authoritative, and unexpected. Karim Al-Rashid had spoken for the first time since she'd entered the room. Sarah froze, her hand on the door handle. "Please sit down," Karim said. It wasn't a request. Richard sputtered. "Mr. Al-Rashid, with all due respect, this is an internal personnel matter. Sit down." Karim's voice didn't rise, but the command in it was absolute. He gestured to an empty chair near him. "Ms. Mitchell, please." Sarah looked at Richard, whose face had gone from red to purple. She looked at Mark Harrison, who seemed suddenly interested in the wood grain of the conference table. Then she looked at Karim Al-Rashid, whose expression remained neutral, but whose eyes held something that might have been encouragement. She sat. Karim opened a leather portfolio and extracted several documents. "Before we continue, I think there are some facts that need clarification." He looked at Richard. "Mr. Thornton, you stated that there is a 15% discrepancy in the Q3 operational efficiency reports. Is that correct?" "Yes, absolutely. The numbers Ms. Mitchell provided don't match our records." "Interesting." Karim slid a document across the table. "This is the original data submission from your department to Ms. Mitchell, dated September 28th, time-stamped and digitally signed by you. And this," He placed another document beside it. Is the report Ms. Mitchell compiled based on that data? The numbers match exactly. Richard's face went pale. That must be an older version. There was no updated version, Karim interrupted smoothly. At least, not one that was officially transmitted through proper channels. However, there was a version that appeared 3 days ago, November 10th, modified by you at 11:47 p.m., after my team requested a review of all Q3 materials. That version shows different numbers, lower efficiency ratings, higher operational costs. The room had gone completely silent. Sarah could hear her own heartbeat. Karim continued, his voice measured. This raised questions for my team. Why would numbers change retroactively? So we conducted a more thorough audit. Ms. Martinez, he gestured to his assistant, who opened her tablet. Would you please share what we discovered? The young woman tapped her screen, and the conference room display changed. Spreadsheets appeared, highlighted in red and yellow. Over the past 18 months, there have been systematic alterations to operational reports. Expenses have been inflated. Efficiency metrics have been deflated. The pattern suggests deliberate manipulation designed to hide approximately $1.2 million in unauthorized spending. Jennifer Torres gasped. Mark Harrison's face had gone white. David Chen actually looked up from his phone. That's absurd, Richard said, but his voice had lost its conviction. This is clearly some kind of mistake, a misunderstanding. Is it? Karim's eyes were cold now, the warmth of courtesy completely gone. Because my forensic accountants have traced the discrepancies to a series of vendor payments to companies that don't appear to provide any actual services. Companies that, interestingly, are registered to addresses associated with your former brother-in-law. Richard stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. I don't have to listen to these accusations. You can't prove. I can prove everything, Karim said quietly. I have bank records, email trails, digital signatures, testimony from vendors who were pressured to falsify invoices, and most damningly, I have the original, unaltered reports that Ms. Mitchell prepared with meticulous accuracy, backed up on our servers from when they were initially submitted for investor review. He turned to Sarah, and his expression softened almost imperceptibly. Ms. Mitchell, you've been covering for Mr. Thornton's errors for how long? Sarah's throat was tight. I don't know what you mean. I think you do. The late nights fixing his mistakes, the reports you corrected before they went to senior management, the presentations you restructured because his logic didn't hold. You protected him because you believed that's what loyalty meant. That's what being a good employee meant. Tears finally broke free, sliding down Sarah's cheeks. She nodded, unable to speak. Karim stood, buttoning his suit jacket. Mr. Harrison, as majority stakeholder, I'm exercising my rights under our investment agreement. Effective immediately, Richard Thornton is terminated for cause. I want him escorted from the building by security, and I want a full criminal investigation opened into the embezzlement. I will cooperate fully with law enforcement. Mark Harrison found his voice. Of course, Mr. Al-Rashid. Absolutely. I had no idea. Didn't you? Karim's gaze swept the room, landing on each executive in turn. Ms. Mitchell was fired in front of everyone for a mistake she didn't make, by a man who was actively stealing from this company, and not one of you said a word. Not one of you questioned it. Not one of you stood up for her. The silence was damning. This, Karim continued, is the culture you've built here. One where competence is punished, corruption is protected, and loyalty runs only upward, never downward. This is unacceptable. He turned to Sarah, who was still sitting, stunned, tears drying on her cheeks. Ms. Mitchell, would you please come with me? She stood on shaking legs and followed him out of the conference room. Richard was already being escorted away by security, his protests echoing down the hallway. The other executives sat in shocked silence, their carefully constructed world crumbling. Karim led Sarah to an empty office, closed the door, and gestured for her to sit. His assistant handed her a bottle of water and a box of tissues, then discreetly left them alone. I'm sorry you had to experience that, Karim said, his voice gentle now. No one should be humiliated that way. Sarah wiped her eyes, mascara probably streaking, not caring anymore. How did you know? How did you have all that information? Karim sat across from her, leaning back in his chair. When I invest in a company, I don't just look at the numbers on official reports. I look at the people. I watch how they treat those with less power, how they behave when they think no one important is watching. He smiled slightly. I arrived yesterday, Ms. Mitchell, not this morning. I was here all day, observing. I ate lunch in the cafeteria. I walked the floors. I watched you work. I saw how you handled pressure, how you treated the mail clerk with the same respect you showed the executives, how you stayed late to fix problems that weren't your responsibility. Sarah's eyes widened. You were testing us? In a way. I've learned that you can tell everything you need to know about a company's real culture by watching how they treat their secretaries, their janitors, their junior staff. You were professional, competent, and kind. Qualities that are rare and valuable. He pulled out a business card and slid it across the desk. I have a proposition for you. My company is opening a New York office to manage our North American investments. I need someone to head the operations team, someone with integrity, someone who understands that real success is built on truth, not manipulation. Sarah stared at the card. You're offering me a job? I'm offering you a career. Starting salary is $180,000. Full benefits, equity stake, and a team you'll build yourself. You'll report directly to me. It was more money than she'd ever dreamed of making. More responsibility, more respect. Why? She whispered. You don't even know me. Karim's expression grew serious. 7 months ago, my younger sister moved to New York to study at Columbia. She was lonely, overwhelmed, struggling with the culture shock. One day, she got lost trying to find an appointment downtown. She was crying on a street corner when a woman stopped to help her, bought her coffee, helped her find her way, gave her a subway map and her phone number, told her to call if she needed anything. Sarah's breath caught. She remembered. A beautiful young woman in a hijab, maybe 19, looking terrified outside a Starbucks in the financial district. She'd seemed so lost. That was you, Karim said softly. My sister told me about the kind American woman who helped her. She didn't know your name, but she described you. When I decided to visit Meridian Capital, I asked to see photos of the staff. I recognized you immediately. He leaned forward. You showed kindness to a stranger when you had nothing to gain. That told me more about your character than any resume ever could. So when I arrived yesterday and saw you being undermined by your boss, saw the way you handled pressure with grace, I knew I needed to understand the full picture. So the whole thing, the meeting, the firing. You knew what would happen? I suspected. Men like Richard Thornton are predictable. They project their failures onto others. When my team discovered the embezzlement, I knew he would try to use you as a scapegoat. His eyes hardened. I also knew that your executives would let him do it. That's why I needed to be there, to stop it, and to expose the rot at the heart of this company. Sarah felt like she was in a dream. I don't know what to say. Say yes. Come work for me. Build something real, something based on merit and integrity. She looked at the card, then at Karim's face. She saw no pity there, only respect, only opportunity. Yes, she said, her voice growing stronger. Yes, I'll do it. Karim smiled, a real smile that transformed his entire face. Excellent. Take the rest of the week off. My HR team will contact you Monday with the paperwork. And Ms. Mitchell, thank you. For what? For helping my sister. For being proof that kindness still exists in this world. 3 months later, Sarah sat in her new office on the 55th floor of One World Trade Center. Her title was Director of Operations for Al-Rashid Ventures North America. She'd built a team of 12 talented professionals, people she'd carefully selected for their competence and character. The office had a view of the Hudson River, and on clear days she could see all the way to New Jersey. She'd kept the navy blazer, the one she'd bought on sale, but now it hung in her closet at home next to designer suits she'd actually earned. She'd moved to a better apartment, paid off her student loans, and started a scholarship fund for first-generation college students in business. But the biggest change wasn't financial. It was internal. She no longer apologized for taking up space. She no longer made herself small to make others comfortable. She spoke up in meetings, advocated for her team, and demanded the respect she deserved. She'd learned that loyalty must be mutual, that kindness without boundaries becomes exploitation, that success built on truth is the only success worth having. As for Meridian Capital, Richard Thornton was facing criminal charges. Mark Harrison had resigned under pressure from the board. Jennifer Torres and David Chen were still there, diminished and chastened. The company had been restructured, and Karim had placed new leadership that understood that a company's greatest asset wasn't its technology or its market position. It was its people, especially the ones others overlooked. One evening, as Sarah prepared to leave her office, her phone rang. It was Karim. Ms. Mitchell, I'm calling to say thank you. The New York office is exceeding all projections. You've built something remarkable. We've built something remarkable, she corrected. You gave me the opportunity. No, Karim said thoughtfully. I simply recognized what was already there. You did the hard work. You always did. After they hung up, Sarah stood at her window, looking out at the city. The same wind that had rattled the windows at Meridian Capital that November morning now whispered against this glass, 45 stories higher. But she was different now, stronger, clearer about her worth. She thought about the girl she'd been, the one who believed that working hard and keeping her head down was enough. She thought about the woman she'd become, the one who understood that true success requires not just competence, but courage. And she thought about a moment of kindness to a scared young woman on a street corner, and how that single act had changed the trajectory of her entire life. Sometimes the universe rewards goodness. Sometimes karma is real. Sometimes the people who seem powerless have more strength than they know. Sarah turned off her office lights, grabbed her coat, and headed home. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new stories to be written. But tonight, she would rest, knowing that she was exactly where she was meant to be, doing work that mattered, surrounded by people who valued her, and in a city of 8 million souls. That was no small thing. That was everything.